Welcome back to Upside Down Data. Let's talk about Polkadot. If you're not familiar, Polkadot is a layer 0 protocol. That means that's a protocol that provides the infrastructure for layer 1 protocols to actually build on top of it. And this has different advantages. It allows for interoperability across all those different layer 1 protocols that are built on top of it, basically meaning that they can communicate with each other seamlessly. Protocols built on top of those layer 1s can communicate with each other seamlessly. Advantages to that. Provides high amounts of scalability and also better security. So there's certain advantages of building on top of a layer 0 protocol, and that's what Polkadot is all about. So of course then DOT is the native token of Polkadot. It's one of the things that helps the network function. So I want to spend a bit of time just talking about its recent price action, and then I want to spend more time talking about some of our models that we have here at the channel and what they're making of DOT's price action and where they think it might be heading. So DOT from the bottom here in October to where it currently trades is up just under 100%, about 95%. So not bad, certainly lower than it had been, up over 200% to the upside. And DOT did get pretty slammed in this recent sell-off that we have. If we just measure from the top of that all the way to the bottom it hit, it was down over 50%, currently down about 41%. So certainly a big sell-off. But this is not entirely surprising. This tends to happen with altcoins in the middle of bull markets. And this sell-off obviously pales in comparison to what we saw, for example, back here with DOT in May 21 going into the summer. So these pullbacks happen. DOT is a pretty young asset, so it doesn't have a ton of examples of this in its past. But if you just look at other altcoins, you see this all the time. It's not a straight line up in a bull market. It will be choppy. And so from this alone, I'm not getting extremely concerned. And what I also want to talk about here is that this sell-off was quite expected if we were just looking at the data. So I want to talk about the data and what they were saying. So this is our upside downside potential indicator. This is our short-term version of this model. It cares about moves that play out over days to weeks, shorter in its time horizon. Higher values mean higher risk, lower values mean lower risk. And you see this model does a really good job of identifying these high risk periods as well as these low risk periods. And when you get to the really high end of this scale, it suggests that some type of sell-off, at least in the short term, is likely. And what we saw over here in this run up was we had this big move up. We kind of cooled off as we consolidated here. We then moved up again, got all the way up to the top of the scale, which is 5. It goes from 5, where the upside potential is exhausted. Downside potential is probably the more likely direction, all the way down to -5, which would be the opposite, where the downside potential is exhausted, upside potential is more likely. We got all the way to the top of the scale here, had this big correction, risk cooled all the way down to just about -3.5, so very deep cooling off of risk, and that set the stage for this next leg up that we got. And then sure enough, back to the top of the scale, that's where we found our top, and down we go. So this correction here was really not surprising at all. I was watching this as it was happening, and when I saw DOT correcting from here, I just thought, all right, that makes sense. We were already tapped out on that run. Probably unlikely we could have continued that in that moment, and indeed we didn't. We just had a deep correction. But notably, where we stand right now is all the way back down at around -3.5, about the same level we bottomed out this time here. So what I'll be watching for is, can we go ahead and do that again? Can we find a bottom down around here and maybe start realizing some of this upside potential? No guarantee that we're going to go ahead and realize all of it like we did these last two times, but certainly some kind of mean reversion back to the upside would make sense. And you would like to see that in a bull market. What you'd really like to see is higher highs and higher lows, or at least not lower lows. And so if we can chart a course to the upside, especially set in a new high relative to what we did in March, that would just be that uptrend that you'd really like to see in a bull market. And looking at risk, we certainly are primed for that type of thing if broader markets allow. If we don't just get a big meltdown in the stock market, for example, or Bitcoin falling off a cliff or something like that, then I think that's very much a possibility. Not financial advice, you should make your own opinions, but that's the thing I'm seeing with this model. And what we can look at to get a better idea of when that might be starting is our trend confidence indicator, or TCI. So this model is all about trend, as the name suggests. And the way that you can read this model is, how is it moving relative to price? So if price is moving up, but the TCI is moving down, that's a concerning sign that suggests that this uptrend is probably weakening and a correction is probably likely. But then if you're in a downtrend and the TCI starts trending up, that's a bullish sign, suggesting that that downtrend is weakening and a bullish reversal might be in the cards. And that's what we saw through here, for example. So if we just zoom in on more recent price action, we can see that we got this upward move on the TCI going into this rally. We then saw the TCI move down aggressively here, suggesting a correction was coming, and that happened. Then the TCI started moving up aggressively, and that suggested that this uptrend was likely to be forming here. And then we saw this happen again, where we had this aggressive move down on the TCI that really heralded in this correction that we saw more recently. So what I would like to see is a move up again on the TCI, really kind of break above this kind of downtrend that we formed on the TCI here, really break above it decisively. That may be a suggestion that this short-term rally that seems quite plausible given where risk is right now might actually be starting. So I think we're a little bit too early to be saying that that's happened yet, but if this uptrend continues on the TCI to the upside, that would be a hopeful sign suggesting that maybe this downtrend is weakening and a reversal is in the cards to realize some of the short-term upside potential that we think is there based on the short-term UDPI. So those are some shorter-term considerations from a more data-driven perspective based on what our models are seeing. I now want to flip over to longer-term data about where we might be seeing DOT being in that longer-term perspective. So this is our long-term upside downside potential indicator. So again, risk model, but this one cares about moves that play out over months to multiple months, so much more macro in its focus. Really try to capture the broad movements of the markets rather than getting too caught up in the short-term volatility. So he does a really good job of capturing these high-risk points in the last cycle, then also these low-risk points down through the bottom, and then we've reversed back up since then. Now, we did get very high on the long-term UDPI in this move up here, although it did cool off quite a bit as we came down and then moved up to a higher level and has cooled off again. And where we currently stand is just above -2. And so this is a bit of a different perspective than the short-term UDPI was giving. And again, the time frame is different. This is talking about really short-term, long-term is talking about longer, broader moves. And so what this means is that this could be a level that we catch a bottom. It's actually about the same level that we rallied out of through here. But it also means that maybe we do have more room to go down to realize some of this downside potential before we can really find that base to move back up. So in a bull market, like we were back through here, you don't really need to get all the way down to the bottom by any means to find a bottom. And so that's what I'll be watching. In fact, in bull markets, you tend not to see that. You actually tend to see higher long-term UPI levels act as that kind of support for moving back to the upside. But something to note that there is, in that longer, kind of more macro perspective, some more plausible downside. So it's by no means to say that, based on some of these short-term data, that we can't move down. That's obviously not the way crypto works. It's all going to depend on what the market wants to do. What are the conditions? And right now, the conditions are definitely favorable in the short term and also reasonable in the long term. Definitely better than we were back through here or back through here, for example. Okay, so now I want to talk about one final model, and that is our forecast model for DOT. So this model is about the 6-month outlook, basically, kind of medium to longer term, depending on how you classify that. And what this does is it gives you a probability that the price of DOT will be higher than it is right now 6 months in the future. That's what the output is. So if you're down here at 0.06, that's it saying that there's only a 6% chance the price of DOT will be above where it is right now 6 months in the future. And the opposite would be something like up here, like 0.83 would be an 83% chance that prices are up in 6 months versus where they are right now. And you see this model does a fantastic job of capturing these broader market dynamics, being bullish through the bull market, really bearish as we went to all-time highs going into the bear market, suggesting that even though prices up at all-time highs, that continuing was very unlikely. And indeed, then we had this nasty bear market. But then it flipped bullish as we got down through here in the bottom, and then price has been moving up. So the good news here is that the forecast model remains in the bullish side. It's at 0.79, so almost an 80% chance in its mind that DOT's price will be above where it is right now 6 months in the future, but certainly not 100%. But better than 6%. And so if you're just basically thinking about direction, kind of a 6-month projection, the model thinks that a bullish outlook still remains the logical choice for DOT rather than a bearish outlook. And so that's where I'm kind of sitting with DOT, is that I think a bullish outlook still remains reasonable. And then we just have to keep an eye on the other data. We have to see, do we get constructive movements on the TCI to suggest that a short-term move is likely? And then where does that happen given the long-term risk? down at this lower level, maybe we do have a reasonable amount of room to rally from there. We rallied from a bit of a lower level back through here, and that took us to all-time highs, though from a higher starting point. Could we see a decent rally off of this should broader market conditions allow? Those kind of things are what I'm going to be watching. How does risk respond? Do we get all the way back up and exhaust a lot of the short-term upside potential, suggesting another correction is coming? Those are some of the things I'm going to be watching in that shorter term. But again, in the longer term perspective, we have plenty of upside potential to work with if we want to, and the forecast remains bullish. And that's the position that I overall am taking right now. That a lot can happen in the short term, but the longer term data still remains bullish. And that's kind of my base case until that data might suggest otherwise. So not financial advice. You should make your own opinions about these data and where you think DOT's going. But that's what I'm seeing from our models right now. So if you want to see live data from our models, you can go to our website, polaritydigital.io, link in the description. And if you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and follow us over on X. A lot of updates about our models and more over there.